A millionaire CEO walks into his bathroom and finds a cleaning lady sleeping on the toilet lid and falls hopelessly in love. Harper Lane never imagined her life would come to this. She used to dream of being a chef, of creating dishes that told stories, flavors that lingered on the tongue like a melody. But reality had a way of crushing dreams beneath the weight of survival. Now, instead of crafting gourmet meals, she spent her days scrubbing floors, emptying trash cans, and wiping down marble countertops in a five-star hotel where the guests barely noticed her existence. Tonight, exhaustion wrapped around her like a second skin. Her muscles ached from working double shifts, morning in housekeeping, night in janitorial. Her feet throbbed inside her worn-out sneakers, and the scent of industrial-grade cleaning products clung to her skin. But she couldn't stop, couldn't afford to stop. Rent was due, bills were piling up, and the gnawing hunger in her stomach reminded her that skipping meals to stretch a paycheck had become her norm. Harper glanced at the large clock in the hallway. 1:43 a.m. Almost done. Just one more room, the hotel's VIP suite. The last thing she had energy for was cleaning up after some ultra-wealthy guest who probably didn't even know how to put the cap back on their toothpaste. But she needed this job. Needed it desperately. So, with a deep breath, she forced her body to move, pushing the heavy housekeeping cart down the silent, gleaming hallways. When she entered the suite's lavish bathroom, the sight almost knocked the wind out of her. It was massive, bigger than her entire apartment. The bathtub alone could fit a small swimming team. Crystal fixtures, gold accents, a marble floor so pristine she could see her reflection in it. Who needed a bathroom this luxurious? She grabbed the disinfectant spray and a sponge, her body moving on autopilot as she scrubbed, wiped, and polished. But her limbs were heavy. Her eyes burned from lack of sleep. And when she bent down to clean around the bathtub, her head rested against her arm for just a second. Just 5 seconds. Just 5. Her breath slowed. Her body relaxed. Then darkness swallowed her whole. Logan Carter wanted nothing more than to shut the world out. The day had been brutal, back-to-back meetings, high-stakes negotiations, and the ever-present burden of being Logan Carter, CEO of Carter Enterprises, billionaire hotel mogul, and ruthless businessman. He had spent his life building an empire, turning his last name into a brand synonymous with power, luxury, and success. But tonight, none of it mattered. Tonight, all he wanted was silence. Loosening his tie, he stepped into his penthouse suite, rolling his shoulders to ease the tension coiled there. The moment the door closed behind him, he unbuttoned his crisp white dress shirt, breathing in the solitude. But something felt off. A strange stillness hung in the air. He narrowed his eyes. His senses had been sharpened by years of high-stakes business dealings. He could smell a bad deal from a mile away. Read a lie before it was spoken. And right now, that same instinct screamed at him that something was wrong. His brow furrowed as he strode toward the bathroom, pushing the door open without thinking. And then, what the hell? A woman was slumped over the toilet lid, her body limp, her head resting against her arm. She was dressed in a hotel uniform, a mop still clutched weakly in her hand. For half a second, his mind went to the worst possible scenario. Was she hurt? Dead? His stomach tightened, his pulse kicking up. Then, she stirred. Logan exhaled sharply as her head lifted slightly, her sleepy eyes blinking open. The moment their gazes met, a slow horror crept into her expression, widening those dark, exhausted eyes. And then, she screamed, a full-blown, gut-wrenching, terror-stricken scream. Instinctively, Logan took a step back, his own heart hammering. What the hell? He barked, his voice ricocheting off the marble walls. The woman jolted, lost her balance, and tumbled to the floor, knocking over a bucket of cleaning supplies. Soapy water spilled across the pristine tiles, spreading in chaotic streaks. Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh my God! She gasped, scrambling backward like she was facing a serial killer instead of a very confused, very shirtless CEO. What are you doing in my bathroom? Logan demanded, running a hand through his already messy hair. She was hyperventilating now, eyes darting around as if searching for an escape route. I fell asleep? Her voice was small, shaky, laced with pure mortification. Logan stared at her, dumbfounded. You fell asleep? In my bathroom? It was an accident, she blurted out, throwing her hands up in surrender. I swear. I was just. She clamped her mouth shut, as if realizing anything she said would only make this look worse. Logan exhaled sharply, crossing his arms over his bare chest. This was insane. Of all the things he expected to find in his suite tonight, a housekeeper napping in his bathroom wasn't one of them. The woman scrambled to her feet, slipping slightly on the wet floor before steadying herself. Her uniform was slightly wrinkled. Strands of dark hair had escaped from her ponytail, and she looked utterly wrecked with exhaustion. For a moment, he just stared at her, noticed the shadows under her eyes, the slight tremble in her fingers, the way she flinched slightly, bracing herself as if she expected him to start yelling. And just like that, his irritation dimmed. Logan Carter didn't have a heart. He didn't waste time on pity or kindness. But for some reason, something twisted in his chest as he looked at this woman. She wasn't lazy. He could see it in her posture, in the sheer panic swimming in her tired eyes. She was just exhausted. Slowly, he sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. What's your name? She stiffened. Harper. Well, Harper, he said, glancing at the mess on the floor. You're terrible at hiding crimes. If you're going to break into someone's room, maybe don't fall asleep on the scene. To his surprise, her lips twitched, a reluctant, barely there, half smile. And just like that, Logan felt something unexpected flicker inside him. He should fire her, report her to hotel management, ensure she never stepped foot in one of his hotels again. Instead, he found himself saying something that shocked even him. Come with me. Her brows knitted together in confusion. What? I need a second opinion on something, Logan said, already walking toward the kitchen. You're awake now, so you might as well be useful. She gawked at him. Are you insane? He smirked. Probably. Harper had no idea that this ridiculous encounter would change her life forever. And neither did he. Harper Lane stood frozen in the middle of the extravagant kitchen, her hands gripping the edge of the marble counter as if the smooth stone could anchor her in reality. Just hours ago, she had been nothing more than an invisible cleaning lady, another nameless face in the world of high-end hotels. And now, she was here, standing in front of Logan Carter, the billionaire CEO who had just made her an impossible offer. I need you to help me fix this, Logan had said, holding out a cup of coffee like it contained the secrets of the universe. Harper had blinked at him. Sure, she had misheard. You want me to, what? Help me fix this disaster, he repeated, waving a hand toward the untouched meal sitting on the counter. A meal clearly meant for someone with an expensive palate. Harper swallowed. This was insane. Just moments ago, she had been asleep in his bathroom, fully expecting to be fired on the spot. And now, the most powerful man in the building, maybe even the whole damn city, was asking for her help. She should have run. She should have politely declined, apologized, and disappeared before her exhausted mind got her into any more trouble. But something in Logan's expression stopped her. It wasn't just annoyance or frustration. It was something deeper, desperation. She didn't know much about Logan Carter except for the headlines that painted him as ruthless and untouchable. A billionaire mogul with an iron grip on his empire. A man feared by competitors and respected by investors. But right now, standing in front of her, he looked like a man who was drowning. And that, more than anything, made her stay, taking a hesitant step forward. Harper reached for the cup in his hand. She sniffed it, instantly recoiling. This smells like burnt regret, she muttered. To her shock, Logan laughed, not the kind of polite, corporate chuckle she had expected, but an actual, genuine laugh that softened the sharp edges of his face. That bad? He asked. Harper wrinkled her nose. Worse. Without waiting for permission, she grabbed a spoon, dipped it into one of the untouched sauces on the counter, and took a cautious taste. Immediately, her lips pressed into a thin line. They used too much lemon, she said, shaking her head, probably to cover up the fact that something went wrong in the preparation. Logan watched her, arms crossed, eyes sharp. And you can tell that just by tasting it? She shrugged. I've been around food my whole life. You learn things. That was a lie. She hadn't just been around food, she had loved it. Once upon a time, before life had become about survival, she had dreamed of becoming a chef. But dreams didn't pay rent. Dreams didn't keep the lights on. So she had buried that part of herself deep, convincing herself that some people simply weren't meant to chase impossible things. But now, for the first time in years, someone was listening to her. And not just anyone, Logan Carter was listening. The realization sent a strange thrill through her veins. "So?" he asked. Harper blinked. "So what? What else is wrong with the food?" She hesitated, glancing down at the array of expensive dishes before her. She shouldn't be here. She should be somewhere scrubbing floors. Invisible like she had always been. But something about the intensity in Logan's eyes made her pulse quicken. So, despite every instinct screaming at her to walk away, she picked up another spoon and took a bite of something that looked like a delicate pastry. Immediately, she frowned. "This is supposed to be sweet?" she asked. Logan tilted his head. "Why?" "Because it tastes like an identity crisis." He let out another quiet laugh, shaking his head. "Explain." Harper set the spoon down, crossing her arms. It's like they couldn't decide whether this was a dessert or a savory dish. They mixed too many flavors. And instead of enhancing each other, they cancel each other out. Logan studied her, his sharp gaze locking onto her face like she was a particularly complicated equation. She shifted under his stare. "What?" she asked. "You're good at this," he said simply. She let out a humorless laugh. "I mop floors for a living. And yet, you just did a better job analyzing this food than half the chefs I've hired." Harper swallowed hard. She didn't like where this was going. Logan took a step closer, the space between them shrinking. "Have you ever thought about working in food?" Her stomach clenched. "Not in a long time," she thought, but she forced a casual shrug. "Not really." His gaze flickered with something unreadable. "Liar." She sucked in a breath. "Excuse me? You have a talent, Harper. You can deny it all you want. But I see it." Her pulse pounded in her ears. This was dangerous. He was seeing too much, reading too much, and the last thing she needed was hope. Hope was a cruel thing. It built you up, made you believe, only to crush you when reality hit. "I need my job," she said instead. Logan didn't blink. "And I'm offering you a better one." Silence stretched between them, thick and heavy. Harper shook her head. "I don't think." "Think about it." He cut in smoothly. "Before you say no, think about what I'm offering." She swallowed, suddenly finding it hard to breathe. Because for the first time in her life, someone wasn't just offering her a job. They were offering her a chance. And that was something she had never allowed herself to even dream of. She should say no. She should absolutely say no. Instead, she whispered, "I need time to think." Logan nodded as if he had expected that. "You have 24 hours. She let out a breathless laugh. "You really like deadlines, don't you?" He smirked. "You'll get used to it." And just like that, Harper Lane's life was no longer the same. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that this moment, this ridiculous, completely insane moment, was only the beginning. Because Logan Carter wasn't just a billionaire with a hotel empire. And Harper Lane wasn't just a cleaning lady. This was something else entirely. And neither of them were ready for what was coming next. Harper just received an impossible offer from Logan Carter. Will she take the leap into the unknown? Or will she let fear hold her back? Fire comment below. What would you do in her shoes? Would you take the job? Would you trust Logan Carter? Speech balloon. Let's talk in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for the next part of Harper's journey. Harper Lane sat on the edge of her small, rickety bed, staring at the worn-out ceiling of her tiny apartment. The room smelled of cheap cleaning supplies and stale air, the scent clinging to her clothes no matter how many times she washed them. A single bare light bulb flickered above her, casting long, wavering shadows on the cracked walls. The place was suffocating, just like her life. The neatly folded uniform from the Regal Astoria Hotel sat beside her. A reminder of where she had been just 24 hours ago. The same uniform she had worn when she had fallen asleep in a billionaire's bathroom. She wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it all, but the weight of the decision pressing against her chest was too much. Logan Carter's words echoed in her mind. "You have a talent, Harper. I see it. I'm offering you a chance." Her fingers tightened around the hem of her oversized sweater. A chance. It sounded so simple, so easy, but nothing had ever been easy for her. Her phone buzzed beside her. She already knew who it was. Rent due. Final notice. She swallowed hard. She didn't need a reminder. The landlord had already knocked on her door earlier that day. his voice dripping with false patience. End of the week. Harper. No more excuses. No more excuses. She glanced around the apartment. The peeling wallpaper. The uneven floors. The tiny window that barely let in any light. The mattress that had more springs than padding. This wasn't just a home. This was a prison. And yet, for years, she had convinced herself that this was all she deserved. Her stomach growled, loud enough to break the silence. She exhaled slowly, pressing a hand to her stomach as if that would somehow ease the ache. She couldn't remember the last time she had eaten a proper meal. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Once upon a time, she had dreamed. She had pictured herself in a chef's uniform, standing in a bright kitchen, creating dishes that made people close their eyes and savor every bite. She had imagined laughter, warmth, belonging. Then reality had crushed that dream. Piece by piece. Her mother had gotten sick. Bills had piled up. College had slipped through her fingers like sand in an open palm. Dreams didn't pay for hospital visits. Passion didn't keep the heat on in the dead of winter. So she had done what she had to do. She had survived. And now, years later, here she was, still surviving. But wasn't there supposed to be more? Her phone buzzed again, jolting her out of her thoughts. This time, a different message. Logan Carter, time's up. What's your answer? Harper's heart pounded. She had spent the last 24 hours convincing herself that she would say no. That this wasn't for her. That taking a risk would only lead to disappointment. But suddenly, all she could see was that bare light bulb flickering above her. All she could hear was the echo of the landlord's warning. All she could feel was the hollow emptiness in her stomach. The hunger not just for food, but for something more. Harper sucked in a sharp breath. Then, before she could change her mind, she typed out a response. I'm in. Harper stepped out of the subway, clutching the straps of her worn-out backpack like a lifeline. The Regal Astoria Hotel loomed ahead, its sleek glass exterior a stark contrast to the world she had just left behind. She felt like an imposter. Her sneakers squeaked against the polished floors as she stepped inside. She half expected security to stop her, to tell her she didn't belong here. But no one even looked her way. Ms. Lane? She turned sharply at the sound of her name. A woman with a clipboard and an air of efficiency stood before her. I'm Stephanie, Mr. Carter's assistant. Follow me. Harper barely had time to process what was happening before she was led through a maze of hallways. Wait, Harper said, struggling to keep up. Where exactly am I going? Mr. Carter's office. Harper's stomach twisted. She was really doing this. When the doors opened, Logan was already inside, leaning against his desk, flipping through a file. He glanced up, his piercing gaze locking onto her like he had been waiting all along. You're late, he said. Harper crossed her arms. You never gave me a specific time. Logan smirked. Touché. Stephanie set a folder on his desk and left without another word. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Logan motioned toward the chair across from him. Sit. Harper hesitated, then slowly sank into the chair. He slid the folder toward her. Contract, he said. Read it. Her hands trembled slightly as she flipped through the pages. Logan leaned forward, watching her closely. This isn't just some experiment. Harper, if you say yes, I expect you to commit. No running, no second guessing. She looked up, meeting his gaze. And if I fail? His jaw tightened. Then you fail. But at least you'll know you tried. Harper exhaled slowly. For the first time in years, someone wasn't telling her she would fail. Someone was giving her a choice. She picked up the pen, gripping it tightly. Then, before she could talk herself out of it, she signed her name. The next few days were a blur. Harper had expected Logan to throw her into the deep end, but nothing could have prepared her for what came next. Again, Logan said, watching her taste a sauce she had just prepared. Harper groaned. I've already made it 4 times. And it's been wrong all 4 times. Harper clenched her fists. It wasn't just about food. Logan tested everything, her patience, her endurance, her ability to handle pressure. You're enjoying this, aren't you? She muttered. Logan smirked. A little. But beneath the sarcasm, she saw something else. Encouragement, expectation. And for the first time, she wanted to prove him right. So she did it again. And again. Until finally, Logan tasted the sauce and nodded. That, he said, is perfect. The words sent a strange warmth through her chest. Perfect. She had never been called perfect before. Late that night, Harper sat alone in the hotel's empty dining room, staring at her hands. She had done it. She had taken a risk. And yet, a tiny voice in the back of her mind whispered, "What if it's not enough? What if you still fail?" She heard footsteps behind her. "You should be asleep," Logan said, stepping into the room. Harper let out a soft laugh. "I don't sleep much." He studied her for a long moment, then sat across from her. "You don't think you belong here, do you?" he asked. She hesitated. "I don't know." "You do," he said simply. Harper looked at him, at the billionaire CEO who had somehow seen something in her that no one else had. And for the first time in her life, she started to believe him. Harper Lane had never known what it felt like to be truly seen. For years, she had been invisible, a shadow cleaning the halls of a hotel she could never afford to stay in. A girl with dreams too big for a life too small. But now, she stood in the heart of the regal Astoria's kitchen, surrounded by gleaming countertops, the air thick with the scent of butter, spices, and heat. She wasn't just surviving, she was creating. It had only been a few weeks since she signed Logan Carter's contract. But everything had changed, and she was terrified. "I need that plated now." Logan's voice was sharp as steel as he moved through the kitchen like a force of nature. "Yes, chef," Harper responded automatically, her hands working quickly, her fingers moving as if they had memorized a dance she hadn't known she was capable of learning. The plate was almost perfect, almost. But almost didn't count here. She placed it in front of Logan, her heart pounding. He studied it, his jaw tight. Then, in front of everyone, he picked up a fork, took a bite, and paused. The entire kitchen went silent. Harper stopped breathing. She could see the way his expression shifted, just slightly. He wasn't the kind of man to praise easily. But something flickered in his eyes. Then he set down the fork and nodded once. "Better." Just one word, but it meant everything. The room exhaled, and Harper felt her shoulders relax just slightly. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. And for someone who had spent most of her life believing she wasn't enough, that small nod meant more than Logan Carter would ever know. But success was never simple. Because for every step forward, there was always something waiting to pull her back. Later that night, Harper stood in front of the hotel's staff bulletin board, staring at something that made her stomach twist. It was a note. "Guess scrubbing floors wasn't enough. Some of us work for success. Others just sleep their way to it." The words were scrawled in sharp, angry handwriting, unsigned, but Harper knew exactly who had written it. Julia, the receptionist who had always looked down on her. The same woman who had laughed when Harper was still in housekeeping. Harper clenched her jaw, her hands curling into fists at her sides. She should have expected this. Of course people would talk. Of course they would assume she hadn't earned her place here. Because how could someone like her, a maid, a nobody, suddenly be working under one of the most powerful men in the industry? How could she possibly be good enough? She swallowed hard, the ugly doubts creeping in. Maybe they were right. Maybe this wasn't her world. Maybe Logan had made a mistake. She didn't realize how long she had been standing there until a voice cut through the silence. "Ignore them." She turned sharply to find Eduardo, the head chef, watching her. She had spent the first few weeks fearing him, convinced he wanted her gone. But now, there was no hostility in his eyes, just something that almost looked like understanding. "Do you know how many people told me I didn't belong in this kitchen?" he asked, crossing his arms. "Too many. But I didn't let them decide my worth." Harper looked back at the note, then down at her hands. She thought about the hours she had put in, the late nights, the exhaustion. She thought about Logan's nod earlier that day, the one moment that had made her feel like she belonged. And she realized something. She didn't need to fight this battle with words. She would fight it with results. So Harper turned, looked Eduardo in the eye, and said, "Then I guess I have work to do." The next morning, Logan Carter did something unexpected. He announced a challenge. "The kitchen is revamping its dessert menu," he said, standing in front of the staff. "I want new ideas. Anyone who thinks they can create something that deserves a place on it, prove it." Harper's pulse jumped. He wasn't talking just to the seasoned chefs. He was talking to her. She could feel the weight of everyone's eyes. Some amused, some skeptical. And Julia, standing near the back, smirking like she already knew Harper would fail. Harper knew what they were all thinking. She's just a maid. She doesn't belong here. But she lifted her chin and stepped forward. I'm in. Logan's eyes locked onto hers. Something flickered there. Then he nodded. Good. The next 3 days were hell. Harper barely slept. She spent every second she wasn't working testing recipes. Failing. Adjusting. She burned caramel. She over whipped cream. She almost gave up. And then, at 3 in the morning, standing in the empty kitchen with flour in her hair and exhaustion in her bones, it clicked. A dessert that wasn't just food. It was a memory. Something her mother used to make when they had nothing but sugar and butter and a little bit of hope. She plated it carefully, stared at it for a long moment, then whispered, "Please let this be enough." The final presentation was brutal. One by one, seasoned chefs presented their work. Elegant dishes, perfect techniques, years of experience in every bite. And then, it was her turn. She placed the plate in front of Logan, her heart pounding. He didn't hesitate. He lifted the fork, took a bite. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, he closed his eyes, not in disappointment, but in something else. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter. "Tell me the story behind this." Harper's throat tightened. She glanced at the plate, at the golden caramelized pastry. The hints of vanilla, the delicate layers of nostalgia. "My mom used to make something like this," she admitted softly, "when we couldn't afford much. It was simple, but it made me feel safe. It made me feel like we had enough. Even when we didn't." Logan studied her. Then he nodded. "It's on the menu." The words crashed over her like a wave. It took her a moment to breathe. She had done it. She had won. The chefs around her murmured in surprise. Even Eduardo gave a small nod of approval. But it was Julia's reaction that caught her eye. She had expected her to gloat over a failure. But now, Julia just looked shocked. Because Harper Lane wasn't just a maid anymore. She was a chef. What do you think? Did Harper deserve her win? Comment below and show your support. Type, "Never give up," if you believe in chasing your dreams. Don't forget to like and subscribe for the next part of Harper's journey. Harper Lane never thought winning could feel so lonely. She had spent years being invisible, struggling to prove herself in a world that didn't think she mattered. And now, her name was on the Regal Astoria's menu. Now, guests were eating her dessert, complimenting her work, asking for more. Now, Logan Carter, the billionaire CEO, the man who never gave empty praise, had chosen her dish over seasoned chefs with years of experience. She should have felt on top of the world. But instead, she felt like she was falling. Because the moment she won, the real battle had only just begun. The night after her victory, Harper sat alone in the hotel kitchen, staring at the stainless steel countertops. The echoes of clanging dishes and hurried footsteps long gone. It was past midnight. Her shift was over. But she couldn't bring herself to leave. Because out there, in the halls, in the staff rooms, people were talking. Lucky break. She just happened to be in the right place at the right time. She must be sleeping with Logan Carter. How else would a maid get ahead so fast? The whispers had started as soon as she won. And now, they followed her everywhere. She gripped the edge of the counter, her knuckles turning white. She had worked twice as hard as everyone else. She had spent years scrubbing floors, watching others move ahead while she was stuck, dreaming of something better. But in their eyes, that didn't matter. They didn't see the nights she had stayed up practicing. They didn't see the exhaustion, the failures, the moments she had almost given up. They only saw what they wanted to see. And it was killing her. A door creaked open, breaking the silence. She turned and found Logan standing there. His sleeves rolled up, his tie loosened. For a second, neither of them spoke. Then, "Why are you still here?" Harper forced a small, tired smile. "I could ask you the same thing." Logan studied her for a long moment. Then, without another word, he stepped inside, walked to the counter, and leaned against it beside her. The silence stretched. Then he said, "They're talking, aren't they?" Harper swallowed hard. She didn't need to ask how he knew. Logan Carter was a man who commanded rooms. He could sense shifts in energy before anyone else. So she just nodded. "I worked for this," she whispered, her voice raw. "I gave everything I had. And still," she let out a hollow laugh. "Still, they act like I don't deserve it." Logan was quiet for a moment. Then he said something she didn't expect. "I know exactly how that feels." Harper turned to him, surprised. You? He smirked slightly. Shocking, right? She waited, sensing there was more. Logan exhaled, running a hand through his hair. When I took over this hotel, he said, his voice quieter now, people didn't believe I could handle it. They thought I was too young, too inexperienced, that I didn't deserve to be here. He paused, and they said worse things about me, too. Harper frowned. She had never thought of Logan Carter as someone who struggled to be accepted. To her, he was untouchable. But now, he looked different, more human. How did you deal with it? She asked. Logan met her gaze. I proved them wrong. The words hit her hard. Because that was exactly what she had been trying to do. And yet, no matter how hard she fought, it never seemed to be enough. She let out a breath. Sometimes, I wonder if it's worth it. Logan tilted his head, watching her closely. Is it? She blinked, caught off guard. But then, she thought about the first time she'd tasted success. The first time Logan had taken a bite of her dessert and paused. The first time she had seen her name on the menu. The first time she had felt like she truly belonged. Harper clenched her jaw and straightened her shoulders. Yes, she said, her voice steady. It is. Logan's lips twitched into something almost like a smile. Then stop wasting time listening to people who don't matter. She let his words sink in. Then, slowly, she nodded. The next morning, Harper walked into the kitchen with purpose. She wasn't here to prove herself to them. She was here to prove herself to herself. The whispers still followed her. The stares, the judgment. But she didn't care anymore. Because at the end of the day, their opinions wouldn't make her better. Her work would. So she did the only thing she knew how to do. She worked. She perfected her craft. She pushed herself beyond her limits. And when the next challenge came, when Logan announced that the hotel was launching a new seasonal menu, she was ready. I want in. Logan met her gaze across the kitchen. There was no hesitation. Then prove it. 2 weeks. That's how long she had to create something worthy of the Regal Astoria's high standards. 2 weeks of sleepless nights, endless failures, and a voice in the back of her head whispering, "What if you're not good enough?" But she silenced it, because she had already come too far. And when the final tasting arrived, Harper stood among the seasoned chefs, her heart pounding, watching as Logan lifted his fork. He took a bite, and for the second time in her life, he closed his eyes. Silence. Then, "This is the best dish I've had all year." The room exploded with murmurs. Harper's breath caught, and then Logan did something no one expected. He turned to the head chef. "Eduardo, put this on the executive menu." Eduardo blinked. "Sir, that's, you heard me." More silence. Then Eduardo nodded. And just like that, Harper's dish wasn't just on the menu. It was on the most exclusive menu. A place reserved for Michelin-level creations. A place where only the best belonged. And she had earned it. Did Harper prove herself? If you think she deserves her spot, comment below with, "She earned it." What do you think? Should Harper ignore the haters and keep going? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like this video if you believe in hard work paying off. Subscribe to see how Harper's journey continues, because this is only the beginning. Harper Lane should have felt on top of the world. She had won. Her dessert, the one she had spent weeks perfecting, was now the highlight of the Regal Astoria's most exclusive menu. She had proven herself. But as she stood alone in the empty kitchen that night, staring at the gold-trimmed menu with her name printed next to her dish, she felt something she never expected. Hollow. Because while she had fought so hard to prove she was good enough, she had never once stopped to ask herself, what happens after you win? The applause had faded. The whispers, however, had only gotten louder. She got lucky again. She must be sleeping with Logan Carter. There's no way she's actually that talented. No matter what she did, it was never enough for them. Even now, even after she had outperformed chefs with years of experience, people still looked at her as if she didn't deserve to be here. She had spent years working her way up from nothing. She had spent her nights dreaming of this very moment. But now that she had it, why did she still feel like she was fighting to stay afloat? The quiet click of the kitchen door opening startled her. She turned, and there he was. Logan Carter. As usual, his sleeves were rolled up, his tie undone, his sharp gaze scanning the room like he could sense something was off. "You're still here." His voice was even, but there was a question buried underneath. Harper forced a smile. "So are you." Logan studied her for a moment, then stepped inside, leaning against the counter. Something's bothering you. It wasn't a question. Harper hesitated. She wanted to say, I'm fine. She wanted to say, nothing's wrong. But then she saw the way he was looking at her, like he already knew the truth. So she sighed, leaning back against the counter beside him. I thought winning would feel different. Logan didn't respond right away. Then he said, it never does. She frowned. What do you mean? He exhaled, looking down at the menu she was holding. When I took over this hotel, I thought success would make me feel something. That once I hit my goals, everything would fall into place. He paused, but it never did. Harper watched him carefully. Logan Carter was always in control, always calculating, always one step ahead. But now, he looked tired. Not physically, but emotionally. Like he understood exactly what she was feeling because he had been there before. She swallowed hard. So what happens next? She whispered. Logan turned to her, his gaze unwavering. You keep going. Harper let out a small, breathless laugh. That simple? His lips twitched into something almost like a smile. No, he admitted. It's never simple. Then, softer. But it's worth it. And for the first time that night, Harper felt like maybe, just maybe, he was right. But no matter how much she tried to remind herself of that conversation, the next few days only got worse. The rumors spread like wildfire. She couldn't walk through the halls without hearing whispers behind her back. And the final straw? It came when she overheard Eduardo, the head chef, talking about her. I don't know what Carter sees in her. She's a nobody with no real training. She'll crack under pressure eventually. Just watch. Harper froze in the doorway, his words cutting deeper than she wanted to admit. She should have ignored it. She should have walked away. But she didn't. Instead, she stepped into the kitchen, her heart hammering, her voice steady. I'm standing right here. Eduardo turned, surprised. But he didn't look guilty. He just folded his arms, raising an eyebrow. And? Harper clenched her fists. She wanted to yell. She wanted to demand why. Even after everything, he still thought she wasn't good enough. But instead, she took a deep breath and smiled. You're right, she said simply. I don't have years of formal training. I don't have a fancy culinary degree. She stepped forward. But I have something you don't. Eduardo scoffed. And what's that? Harper held his gaze. A reason to fight. The kitchen fell silent. And for the first time, Eduardo had nothing to say. That night, Harper didn't cry. She didn't let herself break. She walked into the kitchen and started working harder than ever. Because if they were waiting for her to fail, then she'd make sure she never did. And 2 weeks later, when Logan announced that the Regal Astoria would be hosting a gala event, she saw her opportunity. I want to design the dessert menu, she told Logan. He raised an eyebrow. You sure? Harper nodded. I'm done waiting for approval, she said firmly. It's time I prove I belong here. Logan studied her for a moment, then smirked. Then do it. The night of the gala arrived faster than Harper expected. She had one shot, one chance to show everyone, including Eduardo, that she wasn't just some lucky nobody. She was here because she earned it. And when the first guests took a bite of her dish, everything changed. Because they didn't just like it. They loved it. People started asking for more. The guests, who usually never cared about desserts, were going out of their way to ask who had made it. And then, the moment that sealed it, Eduardo himself took a bite. And for the first time since she met him, he was silent. Then, finally, this is incredible. The words felt surreal. Harper had fought so hard for this moment. And now? Now, it was real. She had won. But more importantly, she had proven herself. To everyone. Harper Lane never thought she'd find herself here. She had spent so long proving she was more than just a maid. More than the girl who had once been caught sleeping in a VIP suite's bathroom. She had fought for every ounce of respect she had. And yet, tonight, as she stood in the dimly lit private dining room, staring at Logan Carter, she felt something she never expected. Fear. Not the fear of failure. Not the fear of being underestimated. But the kind of fear that came when you realized you were standing on the edge of something huge, something that could change your life forever. And once she took that step, there was no going back. The night had started like any other. The restaurant was buzzing with the energy of another high-profile event. One that Logan had insisted she be part of. You belong here, he had told her. And for once, Harper had started to believe it. But then, everything changed. After the event, Logan had led her to this private room. No distractions. No interruptions. Just the two of them. "I need to talk to you," he had said, his voice lower than usual. And now, standing in front of him, Harper could feel her heart pounding in her chest. Something about his expression told her this wasn't about work. Not this time. She swallowed. "What is it?" Logan exhaled, running a hand through his already slightly disheveled hair. "I've been thinking about this for a while," he said. Then, slowly, carefully, he took a step closer. Too close. Harper's breath caught. She had spent months convincing herself that whatever connection she and Logan had was nothing more than professional respect. But standing here now, with his gaze locked onto hers, his expression unreadable but his intensity undeniable, she knew she had been lying to herself. And he knew it too. "I don't know how to say this the right way," Logan murmured. Harper's pulse thundered in her ears. Then he said it. "I don't want to keep pretending." The air left her lungs. Logan took another step, his voice softer now, almost hesitant. "I tried to ignore it. Harper. I told myself I was just impressed by your talent. That I admired your determination. But that's not it." His gaze darkened. "That's not all." Harper's heart stopped, because she knew exactly what he was saying. Exactly what this meant. But before she could speak, Logan sighed, shaking his head with a dry laugh. "The worst part?" he murmured. "I knew from the moment I saw you sleeping in my bathroom that you were going to turn my life upside down." A shaky breath left her lips. She should have laughed. She should have told him he was insane. But the truth? She had felt it too. From the very beginning. Harper didn't know how long she stood there, caught in the weight of his words. This couldn't be happening. Not now. Not when she was just starting to prove herself. "I don't know if this is a good idea," she whispered. Logan studied her. "Why?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. Because how could she explain? How could she tell him that she had spent her entire life being told she wasn't good enough? That she had finally found a place where she belonged, and she was terrified of ruining it. So instead, she said, "Because people will talk." Logan's expression darkened. "They already do." Her stomach twisted. And that was the problem, wasn't it? People already whispered about her. People already thought she didn't deserve to be here. And if she let herself fall for Logan Carter, they would never, ever let her forget it. Logan took another step forward, his hands sliding into his pockets, casual. But his eyes burned with determination. "Harper." The way he said her name sent a shiver through her. "I don't care what they say." She swallowed hard. "You should." "I never have." She let out a breathless laugh. "That's because you're Logan Carter. You're untouchable." His jaw tightened. "That's not true." She frowned. "Yes, it is." She gestured around the lavish private room, the luxury that surrounded them. "You own this world, Logan. I'm still fighting to be a part of it." Something flickered across his face, something raw. And then, before she could stop him, he closed the distance. Not touching her. Not yet. But so close. Close enough that she could feel his warmth. Close enough that if she took even the smallest step, she would fall. "Then let me fight for you," he said softly. Harper's chest ached. Because God, she wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that this could work. That they could stand side by side, without the world tearing them apart. But wanting something didn't make it possible. Silence stretched between them, and Harper realized she had a choice. She could step back. She could walk away, pretend this moment never happened. Or, she could let herself believe. For the first time in years, she could let herself want. Her pulse raced. And when Logan reached out, just the lightest touch against her fingers, she didn't pull away. Maybe this was reckless. Maybe this was stupid. But as she stood there, staring into the eyes of the one man who had never doubted her, the one man who had stood by her side when no one else did, she realized something. For once in her life, she didn't want to play it safe. For once in her life, she wanted to jump. Harper sucked in a breath. Then, slowly, she laced her fingers through his. Logan exhaled sharply, like he had been holding his breath for a lifetime. And when he pulled her closer, when his forehead rested against hers, she knew there was no going back. Not now. Not ever. What do you think? Should Harper take this risk or walk away? Comment below if you believe Harper deserves happiness. Type, "She deserves this," in the comments. Like this story if you want to see Harper and Logan fight for their love. Don't forget to subscribe, because their journey is far from over. Harper Lane thought she had fought the hardest battle of her life. She had clawed her way up from nothing. She had earned her place in Logan Carter's world. And against all odds, she had let herself fall. She had taken the risk. She had let herself believe that love, real love, was possible for her. But what she didn't realize was that love wasn't just about falling. It was about fighting. And tonight, she was about to find out who was truly willing to fight for her. The night was supposed to be perfect. A private dinner. Just her and Logan. A moment to breathe. To escape the weight of expectations. The whispers. The world watching them. Waiting for them to fail. Harper had almost convinced herself that nothing could touch them here. But then, the door to the restaurant burst open. And in walked the one person Harper never wanted to see again. Vanessa Blake. The woman Logan was once engaged to. The woman who had been waiting in the shadows. The woman who was here now. And ready to destroy everything. Harper's breath hitched as Vanessa strode in like she owned the place. Like she belonged at Logan's side. And maybe, in another life, she had. But not anymore. Harper clenched her fists beneath the table. Forcing herself to stay calm. Forcing herself to breathe. Because Vanessa wasn't here for a casual reunion. She was here for a fight. And Harper had spent too long fighting alone. Not tonight. Not this time. Logan. Vanessa purred, her lips curving in a knowing smile. "You've been avoiding me." Logan's expression darkened instantly. For a reason. Vanessa's gaze flickered to Harper. And the disdain in her eyes was like a blade. "And this is the reason?" she asked. Feigning innocence. "You replaced me with your maid?" The words landed like a slap. Harper's jaw tightened. But she said nothing. Not because she was weak. Not because she was afraid. But because she refused to let this woman see her break. But Logan? He wasn't nearly as calm. His chair scraped against the floor as he stood. His voice cold enough to freeze the air. "I replaced you with someone who is twice the woman you'll ever be." Harper's eyes widened. She hadn't expected him to say that. She hadn't expected him to defend her. And by the look on Vanessa's face, neither had she. Her smile faltered, but she recovered quickly, tilting her head in mock amusement. "Oh, Logan," she sighed. "You're adorable when you think you're in control." Then she turned to Harper. Her eyes glinting with something dangerous. "But you should know better." Harper lifted her chin. "Know better about what?" Vanessa's smile was sharp as glass. "You really think this man is going to choose you?" she whispered. Harper's heart stopped. Because there was something in Vanessa's voice. Something Harper couldn't ignore. And before she could stop her, Vanessa pulled her phone from her purse and slid it across the table. The screen lit up. A photo. Logan. Vanessa. Together. A candlelit dinner. Just like this one. Just last week. Harper's stomach dropped. No one spoke. Not for a long, agonizing moment. Harper stared at the picture. Trying to breathe. Trying to think. Trying to find a single reason to believe this wasn't real. But the photo didn't lie. It was Logan, sitting with her, looking at her the way he once looked at Harper. And suddenly, the air in the room felt thicker. Colder. Vanessa smirked. "You see, sweetheart," she murmured. "Logan and I have history." "And history?" She leaned in, her voice dripping with satisfaction. "Always wins." Harper's chest ached. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. She turned to Logan, her vision blurring. "Tell me it's not true." Logan's jaw was clenched so tightly she thought it might shatter. But he didn't deny it. He just said, "It's not what it looks like." Harper's breath hitched. Because she had heard those words before. She had spent her whole life watching people lie with those same words. And she had sworn she would never fall for them. But this was Logan. Logan, who had stood by her side when no one else did. Logan, who had fought for her, protected her, believed in her. Harper wanted to trust him. She needed to trust him. But trust wasn't built on excuses. It was built on truth. And right now, she didn't know what was true anymore. Logan reached for her hand. "Harper." She pulled away. He froze. Because Harper Lane had never pulled away from him before. But now, she felt like she was drowning. Like she had spent her whole life fighting to be more. To be enough. Only to end up right back where she started. Small. Invisible. Replaceable. She stood up. And Logan's face changed. Don't he said, his voice raw. But Harper's heart had already cracked open. She turned to Vanessa. "You wanted me to doubt him," she said, her voice eerily calm. "You wanted me to walk away." Vanessa smirked. "Smart girl." Harper inhaled sharply, then smiled. But it wasn't a smile of defeat. It was a smile of understanding. Because now, she saw everything. Vanessa wasn't here because Logan chose her. She was here because Logan hadn't. She was here because she was losing. And that changed everything. Harper turned to Logan one last time. Her voice was quiet, but firm. "I don't know if I can do this." His entire body went rigid. "Harper, I need time," she whispered. Logan's hands clenched at his sides. His breathing uneven. "And Harper?" She turned and walked away. Because this time, it was his turn to fight for her. The hospital room was quiet, too quiet. The steady beeping of the heart monitor was the only sound in the dimly lit space. Harper Lane sat beside the hospital bed, her hands trembling as she held Logan's fingers in hers. His skin was warm, but his face was too pale. His body, too still. She had always thought of Logan as indestructible. A man who faced the world like he owned it. A man who never bowed. Never bent, never broke. But now, he looked fragile. Like a single breath might steal him away. A tremor ran through Harper as she tightened her grip on his hand. "You promised me," she whispered, her voice thick with unshed tears. "You said you'd fight for me." Her throat burned as she looked at him, searching for something, anything, that would tell her he was still there. Still fighting. But the man she had fallen for, the man who had turned her world upside down, wasn't waking up. And Harper had never felt so helpless. Hours earlier, the night had been normal. Perfect. Even. Harper had been laughing with Logan over dinner, teasing him about how terrible he was at cooking. She had let herself believe, just for a moment, that this was forever. That she and Logan had won. That nothing could take this away from them now. But fate had never been kind to her. And tonight, it had reminded her of that in the cruelest way. 1 minute, Logan had been holding her close, whispering something about Paris, about taking her somewhere she had always dreamed of. The next, gunshots, a scream, then pain. Logan had shoved her behind him in an instant, his body shielding hers as the world around them shattered. And then, he had fallen, blood soaking into his crisp white shirt, the life draining from his eyes as Harper screamed his name. Now, hours later, Harper could still feel his body collapsing against hers. She could still see the blood on her hands. She had pressed against his wound with everything she had, begging him to stay, pleading for him to hold on. And now, she was waiting to see if fate was cruel enough to take him from her completely. Harper felt a presence behind her before she heard the voice. "Miss Lane?" She turned, her heart pounding in her chest as the doctor stepped forward. She couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't do anything but wait. And then, the surgery was successful. Harper broke. The relief crashed into her so hard that she nearly collapsed. She pressed her hand against her mouth, trying to choke back the sob that threatened to escape. "He's okay?" she whispered, barely daring to believe it. The doctor nodded. "He lost a lot of blood, but he pulled through. He's strong." Harper let out a shaky breath. Yes, he was strong, stronger than anyone she had ever known. But she had never been more terrified in her life. And now, staring at Logan's unconscious form, she felt something deep inside her shift. She couldn't do this again. She couldn't keep living on the edge of losing him. Because tonight had proved one thing. Logan was her whole world. And if she lost him, she would never be the same again. Hours passed. Harper never left his side. She stayed awake, watching the slow, steady rise and fall of his chest, her fingers brushing over his knuckles, over the calluses on his hands that she had memorized. She didn't know how much time had passed when she finally felt movement. A twitch of fingers, a slow inhale, then, a pair of blue eyes blinking open. Harper sucked in a sharp breath, her heart hammering in her chest. Logan? His eyes were hazy, unfocused, but then, they found hers, and Harper swore she saw everything. Pain, relief, love. He opened his mouth, his voice rough, hoarse. "Hey, sweetheart." Harper let out a breathless, choked laugh. She wanted to be angry. She wanted to yell at him, tell him that he was an idiot for nearly dying on her. But all she could do was grab his face. Press her forehead against his. And let the tears fall. You scared me, she whispered. His fingers weakly brushed over hers. I know. Harper swallowed the lump in her throat and pulled back, her hands cupping his cheeks. I can't, she stopped, shaking her head. I can't lose you, Logan. Something flickered in his gaze. You won't, he rasped. Harper shook her head again. No, I mean it, she sucked in a shaky breath. I can't do this anymore. I can't keep wondering if I'll wake up one day and you'll be. Her voice broke. Logan's brows pulled together, his eyes dark with understanding. She saw the apology in his gaze before he even spoke. I'm sorry, he murmured. Harper exhaled sharply. She didn't want his apology. She wanted him, whole, safe, hers. And she needed to know that this, whatever this was between them, wasn't going to break again. She needed to know that he wasn't going to keep walking into danger without thinking about what that meant for her. For them. She wiped at her eyes and took a shaky breath. I love you, Logan, she whispered. I've never said it before. But I do. I love you so much it scares me. A slow, weak smile spread across Logan's lips. His hand found hers, squeezing as tightly as he could. I love you too, Harper Lane. Harper closed her eyes, letting those words settle in her bones. And when she opened them, she made a decision. I'm not going anywhere, she said softly. Logan's eyes burned into hers. I know. And for the first time, Harper believed it. The sun was just beginning to rise over the horizon, casting a golden glow across the city skyline. Logan sat on the balcony of his new home, a house he had built not with money, but with love. It had been a long road to get here. A road paved with pain, mistakes, and regret, but also redemption. Because now, for the first time in his life, Logan Montgomery finally understood what true wealth was. It wasn't power. It wasn't business deals. It wasn't the billion-dollar empire he had once fought to control. It was this, the sound of soft laughter from inside the house, the scent of coffee brewing in the kitchen, the knowledge that he wasn't alone anymore, that he had built something real, something that no amount of money could ever buy. And as he turned his gaze to the woman who had saved him, standing in the doorway with a sleepy smile and a cup of coffee in her hands, he knew this was everything. 6 months had passed since Logan almost lost his life. 6 months since he had made a promise to himself and to Harper. To change, to fight for her, to finally become the man she deserved. At first, Harper had been hesitant. She had spent so long believing that love was temporary, that happiness was something that always slipped away. But Logan had proved her wrong. Not with words, but with actions. He had walked away from the business world that had nearly destroyed him. He had invested in something bigger than himself, a foundation dedicated to helping victims of violence, giving them the second chances that he had been given. And most of all, he had stayed. Through every moment of doubt, through every tear, through every late-night conversation when Harper had wanted to push him away, he had stayed. And now, as she sat down beside him, curling into his warmth, Logan knew that he would never stop choosing her. Every single day, for the rest of his life. Looking back, Logan saw how much he had lost before he finally understood what mattered. How many nights he had spent chasing a version of success that left him empty. How many times he had hurt Harper without realizing that she was his greatest treasure. And he didn't want anyone else to make the same mistakes. So here's what he had learned. Money and power mean nothing if you have no one to share them with. Love isn't just about saying the right words, it's about showing up. Every single day. If you find someone who makes your world brighter, don't take them for granted. Fight for them, because at the end of the day, your career won't hold you when you're broken. Your success won't save you from loneliness. Your wealth won't bring back the moments you lost. But love? Love is what makes life worth living. Logan glanced down at Harper's hand resting on his, her fingers intertwined with his own. A soft, peaceful smile played on her lips as she took a sip of coffee. And then, something else caught his eye. A small silver ring gleaming in the morning light. It wasn't extravagant. It wasn't covered in diamonds. Because that wasn't what mattered. What mattered was that she had said yes. That after everything, after every trial and every heartbreak, she had chosen him. And this time, Logan wouldn't let anything ruin it. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss against her fingers. You ready for forever? He murmured. his voice full of love and certainty. Harper tilted her head, a teasing smile dancing in her eyes. I don't know, Montgomery, she mused, pretending to consider it. Forever is a long time. Logan grinned, pulling her closer, his lips brushing against her ear. With you? He whispered. It'll never be long enough. Harper let out a soft laugh before leaning in and capturing his lips in a slow, lingering kiss. And in that moment, Logan knew he had finally found his happy ending. And this time, he would never let it go. What do you think about Logan's journey? Comment below. If you believe in second chances, type "Love wins" in the comments. Like this story if you're rooting for Logan and Harper's forever. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because more stories like this are coming soon.